Continuing to trim the old cone off that I tried to save around the voice coil and the spider. And man, this thing is really brittle. Let me get some lacquer thinner and just place some right around this area. Making a little progress going around the dust cap that I placed on the center pole piece and loosening it up. But this is so fragile, I'm not sure I'm going to be successful. Hey, so far so good. Let me use a brush now and try to put some lacquer thinner around this area. I may be getting lucky here, I'm not sure. Too early to take a victory lap. Well, there we have it. Not sure if the voice coil is still good or not. And maybe I can salvage the spider. The difficulty comes in, you can see the voice coil winding here. I'm pretty sure that's it. And it's making its way up here and then back around through here. And the other voice coil winding. Coming up to this point. Again, you're dealing with the very small wire gauge. Probably 42 or greater. Who knows how this loops around. At this point I may cut right through the wire. So here goes nothing. An executive decision. I'm going to just cut across the bottom side, or the side closest to the voice coil. Right here, and see if I can free the lead. Well, no turning back now. Let me saturate this and see if I can expose the magnet wire. Well, I'll leave that little black stub on there. What's the remains of the cone. So one down. Let me try to repeat the process for the other side. Let me check the DC resistance now. See if we still get somewhere around 3 ohms. Looks like we're in good shape. 3.2 ohms. Very typical for a loudspeaker from this era. You guys can see just how brittle the spider is. Pretty much used up, but I think I can salvage that. One of my viewers, Bart, suggested I use some rice paper and actually keep some of it around just for this, even though many times I'll use coffee filters for the main part of the cone itself. But you can see just how thin this paper is. You can actually see the spider through it. It's a PVA glue. It's also acid free. I will dilute it with some water. Of course, that could add some acidity to it. And see if I can saturate that rice paper. Place it on here, then go back over another coat. And if it doesn't build up the spider and I've still got some good flexibility, I may repeat the process and actually do the back side. Again, you guys can see where I cut that out. Just did some measurements there of the spider. So let me get this thing soaked with some glue and a little bit of water, a few drops, and get it placed on there. Let this set up and dry, and I don't think it's going to hurt anything. It's already in bad shape anyway. So if it makes it too stiff, I'll look for a spider replacement or come up with something different. I think I'll start with the spider itself, and just put a thin, watered down coat on here. What I'm trying to do is just get the two papers to melt into each other. Doesn't seem like it's going to be too hard to do. Continue to work this and bring you guys back for an update. You guys can see I've got the voice coil placed back in around the center pole piece and the spider. Got 4 shims in different directions, and the height of the voice coil somewhat mirrors the design when I tore this thing apart. Probably 1 millimeter or less of height, just to allow a large enough loop for the cone itself to be placed over the voice coil back to the spider. So I'm going to let this set up for a day, and I'll come back and remove this, and then I'm going to remove the entire voice coil and spider assembly and remove this fastener so I can get the output transformer out and see if I can do some touch up on it. So you can see how the mice ate this for dessert or a snack. And I'm not going to try to break the transformer down any further than what you see right now, because I'm afraid I'll do more damage than good. But I'm going to take just a minute and use some of my conformal coating and apply it to the open windings. Hopefully that will provide some protection. And then I'll go back in and recheck the DC resistance. See if this thing still checks good, or if we need to source the replacement or consider a rewind. You can see I'm starting to get the loudspeaker back together after painting the frame. And the center pole piece here is made out of iron, and it still has some of its magnetic energy. It had some rust starting to form, very little, but I could feel it when rubbing my fingers across it. So to get rid of that, you don't want to use steel wool, again, with its magnetic properties to draw that to that, create some problems with reassembly. You could use a Scotch-Brite pad or just a brown bag, coarse, and just go around it. And then I like to apply some Renaissance wax polish over the top of that. It will act as a rust inhibitor, and it gives it a nice slick finish as well. You can see the humbucking coil here that is face down in this direction. And you'll see I have the leads marked for reference. Again, if I get this hooked up backwards, I can always reverse the leads. But just have a tie wrap. And then I've got new heat shrink placed on here. And then a piece of tape, transformer tape on the back side, just overlapping the edge of the area, just to ensure that we don't get any shorts or anything against the frame itself. Looking back at my earlier videos and photographs, this will be the correct orientation. You can see the little nibs here. So again, just making certain that I've got this correct. Let me get the fill coil. I think I'm going to put a couple wraps around it, and then we'll get it placed back in, and then get everything mounted back to the speaker frame. That should secure it. Again, I went over the numbers that were stenciled in on the side, and my bad too, in an earlier video I think I said I thought the fill coil was 1500 ohms on the schematic, but I think what we have is correct. You can see 1250 ohms, and the 49-180 is a match for the schematic. So my bad on that, just a senior moment. I think our correct orientation will be in this direction. It's important to make sure the center pole piece is truly centered, and you can see I'm using shims to do that. That plastic that I used doubled up, and I just have two fasteners in this case with lock washers to secure. So let me do that and just make sure that we're still centered well, and then we can start putting the spider back in. I have the two fasteners tightened down now with the shims in place, so I'll remove those. Then up next there were two flat washers. And the spider assembly itself with the voice coil. Again, my leads are here, so they should come out toward this area. I'll need to shim this as well around the center pole piece and the voice coil. On the voice coil on the inside, I also use the Renaissance wax. And you can see the assembly itself moves back and forth a little bit for adjustment to ensure we have no rubbing of the voice coil. Let me get the shims in place. The area is a lot tighter, so just 3 shims spaced equally apart. And you can see the two fasteners. I'll snug those down. With the fasteners tight and ensuring that my leads for my voice coil are oriented correctly back toward me, this direction, remove the shims. And you can see the voice coil moving up and down freely. In my homemade speaker cone. See, I think that turned out pretty well. If you guys are interested, let me know. I'll share a separate video on how I put this together and did the measurements. And you can see my two solder 2 locations here, with my leads coming out to attach back to the solder 2 terminal location for the output transformer. Let me grab some epoxy now and place it around the voice coil and the edge of the spider, and get this placed down. I let the conformal coating cure for 24 hours on the transformer, and I've double checked my DC resistance on the primary and secondary. Everything looks good. We'll see if this thing holds up long term, who knows. I'm going to try to take some transformer tape or gaffer tape, I haven't decided yet, and just place a couple layers across the bare windings that you see that have the protective coating applied. One more dry fit before I mix up the epoxy and place it around the voice coil. Then it's no turning back, so it is what it is unless we do another rebuild. It'll be interesting to see once I get the radio restored, assuming I'm able to do that, how this thing actually performs. But I think I'm going to go for it, and we'll see down the road if that opportunity presents itself. I'll do some testing using my signal generator and energize the field coil. That'll give us a general idea if the thing will make sound again. So let me get the epoxy mixed up, and then I want to just place this thing off to the side and let things set up for 6 to 8 hours. And then we'll come back and give it a test before I apply any cement around the outside surround. And when my gasket gets here, a replacement gasket, I'll place it on as well. When you're redoing your speaker plugs or alike, just be sure you tin your wires. And like these old conductors, I like to use a little sandpaper on them first. That seems to help. And let me show you one other little shortcut that's helpful. Cut a piece of solder just a little longer than the pin itself. Place it down inside the pin and bend it over as such. And then insert your conductor. And heat everything up. And then add just a touch of solder to the top to flatten it out, and you're good to go. So I think that looks a little nicer and neater than my starting point. So I will place the dust cap on permanently. But before doing so, of course, I'll use some shims on the center pole piece and just lift the surround to place a bead of glue. And then, of course, when the gasket shows up, I'll get that on as well. And then we're wrapped up. Look forward to getting the radio receiver worked on. Hopefully this thing will work well. Looks a heck of a lot better, that's for sure. I've got the loudspeaker energized. Let's give it a little test. Again, I still don't have the dust cap on, nor do I have the surround glued down to the frame at this point because I'm still waiting on my gasket as well. I'll do both at the same time. So I think we'll know if we're successful for sure once we get it back in the receiver, assuming I'm able to make it play again. but well pleased with my efforts on the Electrodynamic Loudspeaker rebuild. Thanks for watching, folks. Take care.